Hello and welcome. I'm Jeannie Long, Executive Director of Chicago Collections Consortium, and thank you again for joining us today for our program, Conversations with Chicago Collections. Today we'll be speaking with Emily Ryer, the Director of Women in Leadership Archives at Loyola University, Chicago. Loyola University is not only a member of CCC, but a founding member and was instrumental in CCC's formation. Please note that today's discussion will be recorded and shared later on CCC's website as well as our YouTube channel. We'd like to begin our program today with Chicago Collections Land Acknowledgement Statement, which reads, Chicago Collections acknowledges and is grateful for the Native Americans who have laid the foundation for the city of Chicago and for the diverse indigenous nations that reside in Chicago today. When you visit our member organizations and when you experience Chicago's outdoor spaces, we invite you in offering respect and gratitude to the many indigenous peoples that reside in the Chicagoland region, as well as their ancestors. I know many of you listening today are familiar with Chicago Collections, but for those of you who aren't, Chicago Collections is an organization comprised of over 60 museums, libraries, all working together for the preservation, promotion, and sharing of our member collections. Please check out CCC's Explore Chicago website for a dive into our members' archival collections. We also encourage you to visit our online listing of additional events that are being offered. All of CCC's events are offered freely and are posted on our website. And again, as mentioned earlier, are recorded and shared on our YouTube channel as well as back on our website. So in case you want to listen to this fabulous program today, you have every opportunity to go back in a couple days and listen to the recording. Additionally, we'd like to thank CCC's generous donors shown here, whose funding allows us to offer amazing free programs like the one we're doing today, in addition to supporting our efforts with the Explore Chicago Collections portal. Thank you. And also a huge thank you to Emily. Emily, I'm so appreciative of you taking the time for our conversation. Let's begin with information on the founding of the Women in Leadership Archives and how did it find its home at Loyola University Chicago? And we'd love to hear a little bit about your background as well.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Once again, I'm Emily Ryer, the Director of the Women in Leadership Archives. So I started here in this role in January 2020, so just celebrated 5 years. But it's been a bit of a homecoming because I actually went to Loyola for undergraduate. Before my time here, I worked at some other CCC member institutions, including the Oak Park Public Library. Since I've been here at the WLA, we have actually celebrated our 30th anniversary. So our 30th anniversary was last year, 2024. Thanks to all who celebrated with us. During that year, we did some different programming that was open to the public. So the WLA was established in 1994, and its origins really go back to Mundelein College. So Mundelein College was the premier, thank you so much. Was the premier all-women Roman Catholic college situated right next to Loyola University's Lakeshore campus. So if you've ever driven down Sheridan, right where it curves, and you've seen that big, beautiful Art Deco skyscraper building, that was the original Mundelein College building. It was such a roaring success that they quickly had to acquire some additional land and buildings, which is what brings us to Piper Hall. So Piper Hall was originally the Mundelein College Library. Piper Hall, as you can tell from its architecture in the picture here, was originally in private hands. It was a family home, so it was in private ownership by two families and then sold to Mundelein College in the 1930s. If you'd like to learn more about the skyscraper building that I mentioned or Piper Hall itself, we actually have some really great building histories on our website that go into some of the former Mundelein College buildings. So Mundelein College.
It's a
Oh, thank you.
beautiful building, and going to see the collection there is just, you're enhanced by the architecture and the interior architecture, and you make great use of the space.
Thank you. Yeah, we're so fortunate. And once again, it's right on that bend on Sheridan Road. So sometimes people see this beautiful white marble four-square building and go, "What's that? What's in there?" So that's the Women in Leadership Archives and the Gannon Center for Women in Leadership. So getting back to the sort of sweeping Mundelein College history and how that relates to the WLA, Mundelein College affiliated with Loyola in 1991. So after that affiliation, there were sort of two main things that were established. The first was the Gannon Center for Women in Leadership in 1993, and then us, the Women in Leadership Archives, in 1994. So we've had a couple of different physical homes on campus, but we've been in Piper Hall since 2005. That was their last major restoration of the building. So we're very fortunate to have our own dedicated archival storage space, as well as a reading room that is available to the public, which I can talk a little bit more about later. So administratively, we are a part of both the Gannon Center for Women in Leadership and University Library. So I report to both the director of the Gannon Center, which has faculty fellowships, undergraduate scholarships and programming here at Loyola. And then University Libraries is hopefully self-evident.
Emily, I know you've got, could you tell us a little bit about your team there? And everybody's always so welcoming when I come, but also the engagement of Loyola students too.
Yeah, so we are incredibly fortunate to have two full-time positions currently. So myself and our assistant director, Laura Burfield. We also have two graduate assistants. The graduate assistantships are open to graduate students at Loyola of any major, but obviously it's usually folks from history, public history, and sort of related fields like women's studies, gender studies that tend to apply. So we've been very fortunate in that way to provide that type of hands-on experience for folks who are hoping to go out and do this type of work after graduation. So again, they are doing very hands-on work with processing collections, assisting researchers, and it's been a very beneficial situation for everyone involved. That's our current team. I like to say we're somewhere between a small and a medium-sized archives, depending on how you look at the staffing and the collection size. We have right around 200 collections right now, and about 1,500 linear feet. So again, depending on how you use those terms, small to medium. Yeah, so talking more broadly about campus primary sources, as was mentioned before, Loyola is proud to be a member of the CCC, and that membership is not just the WLA, it's also University Archives and Special Collections. So University Archives and the WLA have their own sort of distinct histories. University Archives is located over in the library proper in Cudahy Library. And then talking a little bit about our researchers. So although we are located on a college campus and obviously serve the Loyola community and have lots of class visits coming in and professors coming in to do research, we are open to all. So we have had visiting researchers from all over the world come in. We've had Chicago Metro History Fair students, journalists, genealogists. We are open to all. We just ask that you email us to make an appointment, and I'll have my contact info at the end of this presentation. So we do have an appointment system just to be able to serve people better. It's such a better use of time if people are able to tell us in advance, what their research interests are, what they'd like to see, so that when you're here on campus, you are making the best use of your research time and really getting through those boxes.
In your time there, Emily, you've done such a great job of promoting the resources that are available to the general public. So that's exciting to see, and the listing of digital resources, not only on CCC's website, but Women in Leadership Archives website as well. So that's awesome.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
so let's dive into the collection part, the discoverables.
Yeah, so what we actually have. So our aim is to collect and make available permanently valuable records of women and women's organizations, which document women's lives, roles, and contributions.
But just to clarify, women within from women's lives within the Chicago and Chicagoland area specifically then.
That's right. So kind of looking at our geographical area focus, we're kind of looking first at the Chicago area. So in the immediate vicinity. So we have a lot of collections from the Rogers Park and Edgewater neighborhoods because that is where we are physically situated, then kind of expanding out to Chicago and the greater Chicago area, then sort of getting into the Great Lakes Midwest region. And lastly, looking at things that are maybe out of state, out of the Midwest. My personal opinion as an archivist is that, it's nice to keep collections close to that sort of geographical area of origin. So I will say, usually if we're saying no to a collection, that's why there's probably a fabulous archives closer to them geographically where that would be more of a fit. That's where the users are going to want to go. They might not want to travel out of state. So yes, we really kind of do have this Chicago focus in particular.
But it is amazing when you dive into history and, not only Rogers Park and beyond, and Evanston and the role of women, the important role of women, that have played over time. So when we talk about Frances Willard and, things like that. So pretty amazing.
Great. And you can go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. Great. So getting into some of those individuals. So we have collections from both individuals and organizations. And we'll talk in a little bit about the collecting scope, but just to kind of whet everyone's appetite. Some of the individuals listed here are artists, academics, writers, community activists, politicians. Listed here are labor organizers, and we also have the first woman religious who has ever elected to political office. Her name is on this list too. So again, that's just some of the variety that we have. Then if you'd like to advance to the next slide, please. And then some of the organizations that we have, again, these kind of focus on activism, social justice, different cultural and civic organizations, organizations that are trying to advance the role of women in the church or different sort of political rights for women as well. You can advance, please.
And one of the things, though, before we advance, we had talked about prior to going live that, organizations that are still continuing in their history. So it's not, here's our archives, we're done. It's that continual update that your staff is involved in updates to current collections and things. So it's never over, so to speak. So
that's right. I think sometimes there's this misconception that if someone wants to donate to an archives or for something to be in an archives, that the individual needs to be deceased or the organization needs to be defunct. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Having something in an archives is not like saying that something is vintage or antique. We're not saying that it's X number of years old. We would gladly accept a document that was created today if it fits within our scope.
And it's amazing when we talk about, scope of work as related to these collections, the tremendous, you go through the processing, you make it available, but the associated staff time and costs, I don't think, people realize the true amount of work that's involved of getting it from, coming in to the end result of making it available to the users. So and especially if it's an ongoing process.
For sure. Yeah, so talking about some of those collecting subject areas. So we have 11 different areas of collecting focus, which means that in addition to having to sort of go over that first hurdle of, is it, women's organizations, geographical area, the collection needs to relate back to at least one of these. So most of our collections, I would say, fall under 2 or 3 or 4, maybe even 5 of these different categories. Some of these are more obvious than others as far as how they kind of relate back to Mundelein College. So women religious, for example, Mundelein College was founded and run by the BVM sisters. But other areas, unless you were more familiar with the history of Mundelein, maybe you wouldn't be as familiar with. But just to clarify, someone does not have to be affiliated with Loyola or Mundelein to deposit their records here.
And tell us a little bit more on these topics. The discoverable that when you first came on the scene, like who knew that moment? What were you surprised to see?
Yeah, when I started, I think we only had 9 areas of collecting focus. So I'm, kind of, I don't want to say contributing to that change, I guess. It became clear that we needed to clarify some of the language to make it more obvious to our users what these different things meant. We also didn't want to be overly prescriptive in some of these areas, but at the same time, we saw a need to expand. We had a couple of pending collections where we hadn't officially agreed yet with a donor and realized that there was a gap in collecting and that other similar institutions weren't accepting these types of things. So for example, athletics, we had some pending collections that we realized there wasn't really another place for these things that would sort of easily fit, where they would sort of make sense. So that was one of the areas that we expanded. Some of the other ones that are on here, so like science, technology, and engineering, Mundelein College had a very, very strong science program, and we have some interesting digitized materials of a pendulum, for example, that had its home in one of the elevator shafts of the Mundelein College skyscraper, which is really crazy to think about. So things like education, again, kind of being a school, civic and cultural engagement, those are really big touchstones for Mundelein College as well. So again, you can kind of see how some of those things take shape. The public service and politics, we have the papers of several local older people who served in the Rogers Park and Edgewater neighborhoods. So in that way, again, we're not just preserving, some of this history that's related to Loyola and Mundelein, but also thinking about the community that's here as well.
Yeah, and I think as you pointed out, it makes it that much easier for the user in terms of, best interest of their time, what they could find and what your areas have concentrated on. When I think of Sister Jean, not only women religious, but she'd cross over into athletics too, in terms of her support too. So, covering a couple different areas.
Great. So as far as the format, so just kind of similar to that point that I was making about different date ranges, things don't necessarily have to be paper to come to our archives either. So we do collect a wide variety of things. So paper, audiovisual materials, photographs, the occasional three-dimensional object. And I say occasional because as an archives, we don't have permanent display space or gallery space as such. So especially with, I think some of the artists that we work with, if their intention is to get their artwork out there and to have that displayed, the WLA might not be the best home for that painting or that sculpture, but we would be a good home for that supporting documentation. So if they have flyers from a gallery opening that they did, if they have reference slides that they use to create that painting, those are the types of things that would be coming to us. So again, the three-dimensional objects is really on a case-by-case basis. And the last, but certainly not least, is electronic records, whether that is born digital that's coming our way or digitizing that we are doing on site.
And obviously, here's a listing of the information. If you're interested in paying a visit to the Women in Leadership Archives or reaching out to Emily directly, we'll share that for a little bit. Emily, one of the questions that comes to mind too when you were talking about the variety and of the actual scope of work, is everything stored on campus, or do you have off-site facilities for your collections?
Everything is here in Piper Hall. So there was that one slide that showed just a row of shelves. So we have our nice archival compact shelving that most of our collections are in. And then on the third floor, which is our publicly accessible reading room space, we do have some additional shelving there. But again, that's a very small fraction of the collection. We've been extremely creative in some of our housing. And knock on wood that it'll continue to serve us, especially as we continue to process our collections, because of course, as you process collections, things start to shrink down a little bit.
Mhm, mhm. And I know you had mentioned it's the anniversary year. What might our listeners look forward to? I was happy to be part of to pay a visit for the anniversary celebration, but what lies ahead as it relates to the anniversary?
Yeah, so we concluded our sort of 30th anniversary celebration in 2024. However, we do have some great programming coming up in April. So that gives plenty of time. If you're not signed up for our newsletter already, you can go to our homepage, which was the luc.edu/WLA. And if you scroll to the bottom of our page, there's a little newsletter sign up link. We tend to only send those out maybe once a month, maybe every other month. But that will give you the most up-to-date info on what we're up to. Our next item coming up is on Thursday, April 3rd. We are doing an open house event. That will be from 4 to 6 p.m. So folks can come up and visit the WLA. You don't have to RSVP or make an appointment. We'll have some items out on display, but it's kind of a nice way to kind of come check us out if you haven't seen the building before, get to see some of the collections on display without having to make some of those decisions or selections yourself. So we hope to see some of you there then.
We have a question, Emily, that came in. Is the WLA a closed stack? I mean, can researchers check out items? What's your policy on that?
It is a closed stacks environment. So again, that's where that appointment system is so important, because we grab everything for you in advance. Our finding aids are all located on our website. So again, that same luc.edu/WLA. In the top navigation, there's a bar called collections, and then search the collections. And that entire page has PDF finding aids of everything that's available. If you see a collection that doesn't have a finding aid, you can always send us an email to ask for more information about it.
Great. Well, we really appreciate your time and to have this discussion. We look forward to what might be some of the things that our users at the Chicago Collections Explore Chicago Collections portal might be seeing coming in from Women in Leadership Archives. What do you have planned there?
Yeah, we're so excited to be a part of CCC and a part of the Explore portal. We have some content in Explore already. So we do have finding aids in particular for related collections. So we have some updating to do there from new collections over the past couple of years, or again, kind of what we hinted at before with new materials from existing individuals and organizations, just to keep that updated. And we also have some updates to send about some of the digital projects that we did. So over the pandemic, we engaged in an oral history project over Zoom, where we interviewed Mundelein College alumni. So we will look into adding that. And then also some of the digitization projects that we have done as well. So we use a platform called Preservica for our digital objects. So again, we can share out some of those links as well to make them a little bit more accessible.
Emily, how many, just curious, how many of the alums were you able to interview?
Oh, quite a few. I think our first call, we maybe had a dozen people, and then since then it's been maybe about 5 people every time. So we had one sort of large call, and now we're kind of doing it on a case by case basis. I wouldn't say the project is completely over. It's more
Sure.
of if someone expresses an interest in being interviewed, then we can have that conversation.
Do you remember what the earliest class person was from, or how far back did it go?
Pretty far back. So the Zoom interview that we did was really meant to be a continuation and build from previous oral history projects. So this portal had been built by previous leadership and previous students to showcase some of these older, more analog oral histories, and we are kind of building from that. So we have some interviews that go back to like the 40s and 50s, but most of them are classes of like 60s and 70s by this point.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
We'll really appreciate your time. We'll look forward to seeing more on the Explore portal. We encourage our listeners to jump on Women in Leadership Archive's website to hear about additional resources as well and events. So thank you so much, Emily, and thanks for your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.